Hello everybody and welcome to today's BAInsights session, and today we're talking about context and use cases, and once again I'm delighted to be joined by three excellent guests to join me on this conversation. As ever, let's start with some introductions. So perhaps Karen, if I can ask you to introduce yourself first, please.
Yeah, thanks, John. So my name's Karen Newnham. I am currently head of business analysis at the Coal Authority, which is an arm's length body of the UK government. And I've been a business analyst and been involved in change management and all the other kind of related roles for more than 20 years.
That's perfect. Thank you. Let's start, Karen. And Hasmik, over to you, please.
Yeah, thank you, John, and thanks for this invite, and happy to be here. So I'm currently product owner within the Energize Global Services from in Yerevan, Armenia, and we're working partnering. The company partners with Worldline corporate payments company, and we are working on the information repository for the European banks. So happy to be here and share with my experience on this subject.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And last but not least, Nuno.
Thank you, John, for I'm very humbled by your invitation. So my name is Nuno. In Portugal, which is basically also to say that as the way we organize that, I am the main face of some of our clients, and based on that, I kind of assemble the team for our most priority things. I've been a BA for 15 years now. So starting early just for writing things and then go on with the interviews, the workshops. So meanwhile, I also got the chance to get in charge of things, also doing some mentoring of new BAs to my team. And now I am in charge of some of my clients in the in our procurement unit. So also sometimes I write some things. I post some articles. I was able already to have some things published on BA Digest, BA Times, IIBA, and also I'm a volunteer at IIBA Brazil, because that's actually the end. I'm in Portugal, but it's the only chapter with Portuguese speaking, since we don't have a chapter in Portugal itself. So I'm very glad to be here.
Excellent. Thank you, Nuno. And thank you again, everybody, for the introductions. Let's start, if we can, the first question to Karen in the first instance, around how, Karen, that you approach identifying or exploring the context or use cases as part of your projects or engagements as BA, please.
I think it's a good place to start is to make sure that it's probably a very simple thing, really. Is to start by making sure that you understand kind of all the stakeholders that need to be involved in those conversations, and where all of the who might have all of the existing documentation, information that will relate to the context that you're looking at. That obviously evolves over time, but you need to start with having an understanding of who's going to have that knowledge. And then the approach would be to build that picture up over time. And we'll probably come up later about what sort of diagrams, what works in what context. But the most important thing is that you've drawn a diagram or created a context picture that actually people understand and it's meaningful to them, and they recognize the things within it. So yeah, my approach would be that I would be engaging people and involving them in that process of creating that documentation.
Excellent, thank you, Karen. And really, I guess then you're starting the ball rolling in terms of getting things documented, getting them on screen, or getting them captured so that people can start to interact with what it is you've understood or what it is you've defined. So, and I'm sure that applies to many things, not just the context. Hasmik, if I can ask the same question to you, please.
Yeah, overall, the content and the use cases themselves are one of those greatest techniques that are really could be used as a conversation between the technical teams and the business stakeholders. Yeah, they are very well understood. Also be used to define the technical design itself. Yeah. On the other hand, it's quite simple and it's very easy to understand for the business people as well. So what's I loved for these techniques is that they set the context and the overall use cases themselves for both teams. So yeah, that's my perspective for the really.
Okay, excellent. And I guess to supplement what Karen said there, sort of building up that picture of, like, as she mentioned, the stakeholders, you're referring to the use cases and the objectives of those stakeholders. So it's very much building on that picture, isn't it, of the context.
Exactly.
And Nuno, it would be interesting to hear your perspective as well, please.
Yeah, so I guess that when you are a BA and a new project is starting, what you want to do first is to actually understand what you're getting into. So you get who your stakeholders are. There different types of users? Are there any other systems that go around your system? In which business process is it fitting into? So that's why. And of course, it's also always very important to have that written somewhere. But if we are able to actually draw it, I think it helps us also to memorize it more quickly than just some sentences. Of course, you always had that tendency to do that exercise when the project is starting, but I think with that we all agree that it's something that we should keep revisiting many times, and that actually that's one of my advices also, not just when the project is starting, but if let's say that you are also a BA and you go into the project that is already ongoing, even if you don't see it anywhere, it's always my main suggestion to that person is, okay, just do it yourself, your context, and you try to do your use cases for you to have a clear picture what is actually around the new solution, the new service, whatever.
Yeah, I would agree. And I mean, I think it's also a good opportunity at this early stage to involve the wider team. So if it's a team of business analysts rather than just one individual, engage the team, involve the team, so that you can collectively start to understand the business context and who the stakeholders are, as Karen mentioned, what the use cases are, as has been mentioned as well. So a good opportunity to just get all aligned and on the same picture, as it were. Excellent. All right. And I think sort of Karen alluded to techniques a little bit in her answer, but if you don't mind, we'll start with Hasmik first in this sense. So be interested to know what methods or techniques that you use when defining or exploring the context or use cases.
Yeah, well, for the context itself, I'm in general, yeah. By the way, I'm also doing some mentoring and providing trainings for the business analysts locally, and what I say to the trainees all the time, yeah, to start on a project really is to identify from the business requirements basically all the nouns, yeah, all the objects that are part of that business requirements, and from there start assigning verbs to them, yeah, based on the on the context of the actual business requirements. And from there, you have all these nouns, all these objects, and you can define the relationship between them and set the overall context for your project. So it's an easy way to look at the business requirements, and from there, doing some syntactic analysis by finding nouns and the verbs and just getting the context of your system. And then from there, using those verb nouns, and you can go on and elaborate further, of course, based on your business requirements. You have all the functional side, the functional requirement, by setting up the use cases and going all those basic scenarios and all identifying the alternative scenarios and all defining all those components in it. And it's really easy from there to get them from the business requirement, the whole functional itself, really. So this provides the trainees some easy workflows with defining of the functionals, basically. That's how I see it. And it's really easy for them to grasp this information and to start with, basically, with the business analysis of functional specifications.
And it's a really good way of actually leveraging the information that they see before them and using it as a way to validate they've got all the right information. Because I imagine, if they're lifting key concepts from the requirements and trying to show how those things relate to each other, if there's not a natural relationship between one thing and another, then perhaps that's calling out the absence of a concept that might be quite key. But of course, getting it on paper will help that. Excellent, brilliant. Thank you very much. And Nuno, be interested to hear your perspective on that question, the techniques and methods.
Yeah. So you to build your context, you basically want to start deep diving in everything. So that's why you go to your the document analysis, if there is any document, but where you get the most out of it I think it will be to you will get to people, or you book a workshop, or you just get like those interviews, because you just have to understand which is the process where you are working on, and you will gradually discover more and more people that actually are involved in that process, which will make you talk to more people, or maybe because maybe start hearing some names or some acronym that you don't know, and you will have to find out. That is usually where I get my inputs, and of course, then we have to, after talking to a bunch of people, you have to sit down and clear our thoughts, and do like those mental models and sketches, so you can have a clear picture on how things get to interconnect with each other.
Yeah, and actually it is very much about that picture, isn't it, and connecting in quite a lot of way. As you mentioned, process as well. I mean, for me, quite often the process can provide the context in some situations. If the context and the process are high enough, defined at a high enough level, they can be an easy way to understand things. And Karen, your opinion, please, on that one.
Yeah, I mean, all of the points already made, Nuno and Hasmik. I've used all of those kind of techniques before, and they're really good. I think that the verb noun bit, especially, really useful to pull that out. I do, when I'm coaching people on that particular element, try and get them to challenge stakeholders to get clear verbs. So, where you've got manage, what does that mean? Can we get some more clarity in that space? And I think that's really probably brings me on to the next point. And there are a number of techniques I'll call out, but I guess before I call them out, there is no one size fits all. It is kind of what works best for the context and your audience as to how you want to represent use cases and represent requirements to get, but the main sort of thing that you want to be mindful of when you're doing that, and you might pivot if it doesn't, you might change your approach if it doesn't work, is if you're not getting that clarity of communication across your audience, if they're not understanding what the terms mean and what the connections mean between the boxes and what the overall picture means, then actually it's a fail. And I have seen so many people get so wedded to a certain way of describing or using a particular technique, and not really doing that test of it being clearly communicating what it needs to communicate. And so I think that's really important, to do that as well, and make sure you feel it's quite hard to take something out that you've drawn and get feedback on it, but it's really important that you do get that feedback loop going and you get your stakeholders to say, yeah, this does represent, I do recognize this does make sense to me, either in an as is or a to be perspective, however you're doing that. Some of the options I've used, and again it's contextual, but I've done very high level BPMN to represent swim lanes of different departments perhaps, or even different parts of the stages of the process sometimes as well. Context diagrams, which can be like very high level process diagrams, just flowing down. Use case diagrams are quite good. People, again, none of these are complicated, and so most audiences get them. One that I did find particularly useful, and it works if you've got like a customer journey, you're in that kind of context, is a service blueprint, because that you can kind of show. So the service blueprint would have the customer journey across the top, and then sort of all the front and backstage activities that contribute to that. And that can be a really good way of representing something. But as I said, it's all down to what's engaging your audience, what they really, what they understand. Because if they're not understanding it, then it's not doing its job.
And I mean, just from the three of you, your answers, I mean, it showed there's different ways to contextualize and to show that bring those things together, those different concepts together, which is important. And I mean, actually, all I would add then is that sometimes there's different ways to visualize that in maybe a more interesting, more engaging way, or a way that resonates most with your audience, and that can be something you might have done before. It might be effective, or it might be something you might have observed perhaps in the BA community, and think actually now would be a good time to slightly to bring out a new technique, or to bring out a new way of visualizing information as well. Ordinarily, I'd ask Nuno this next question first, but I'm going to ask Karen, just because, Karen, you mentioned connecting or connections as part of your last response. So the next question I want to talk about is how you connect your context and your use case diagrams perhaps to or your context diagrams to other deliverables and artifacts that you start to produce as an analyst. So if you wouldn't mind going first on this occasion.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So I'll use the service blueprint one as an example again, because I thought that one worked quite well. So that was in an agile environment where there were user stories related back to tickets. So everything had a reference in Jira, it could be something else. And so I was able to be able to map all of those ticket references to the stages in that diagram. And that was written, that blueprint, and that was really powerful, because you could have a conversation not only about, you could have a conversation about priorities, you could have a conversation about how you were iterating up the journey. You could have a conversation with people on the business side, because this was a new product that we were providing. So we were building that up iteratively, and say that word not properly. And so some of the back office processes were working manually for a period of time until that service was fully implemented. So it allowed us to have conversations with the business users so that they could see which elements of that journey they had to fill in the gaps of before, as we kind of went through the stages of iterating. So that can be a good way of that's a good example of linking things together. I think the other point I would make, because I guess a lot of it's down to sort of maybe a lot of it can be down to using references of some sort to link things. I think the other point in linking things is to use consistent language across everything you're doing. So a language that's understood by everybody. So terms and language are really important. Not to be underestimated, that if you're not kind of using something consistently across all of your different artifacts, that builds in confusion and makes it more difficult to get everybody on the right kind of level with what we're delivering.
Yeah, I would agree. It sort of undermines a little bit the good work that you can do with your different techniques that you might apply to your service blueprint in this case. If it is consistent in its language and the position and the I guess the level of detail, these little things don't get picked apart, and therefore your analysis can be looked at with a bit more credibility. People perhaps will take the time to get behind it rather than to try and undermine it perhaps. Nuno, be interested to hear your perspective as well on that, please. That question around connecting your context.
Yeah, actually, my experience is a bit similar to Karen's. So I started using use cases and context diagrams also when a big part of our job was making the first big document, and we just put it all in, and we have these references, what the stakeholders were asking, and gave it like a reference. Their needs, this need A, B, and C would originate these kind of use cases, and then ultimately I would say to fulfill this use case, now putting more on agile now, and to fulfill this use case, I can do user story 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which was whichever management tool we had, but we had to always did that using a management tool. So even now that we don't make that like having a document just for the sake of having a document, I personally still kind of use documents, even if I don't share it with anyone, just for myself, to know why did I write that user story in the first place, because it's actually one of the okay, no, I'm missing the word. It's not one of the traps, but it's one of the main obstacles that even in the IIBA Agile extension to the BAIbook, it says one of the traps of only solely focusing on user stories is to get lost on the big picture. So if I write a user story, but even if it's just in a document for me, and now even when we use the document platforms like a Confluence or like something else, but if I have that link, so I can see where did that user story come from. So like I said, even if I don't share it to anyone, I just use that for my personal organization of my work and my way of managing things. I do agree that this kind of diagrams, so they are even easy to explain to our stakeholders, which was not the case if we continue to use other diagrams from UML. Usually I stop there on use cases, but if I show it for someone on the IT, something they would actually also easily understand. So then use cases will also show me who was the actor of that use case, and then of the user story. So, and again, which if there were like external systems involved, even context diagrams, they show kind of, they are simplify also in a way that you can say for any action, which direction from the user to the system, to the system to the user. It's very easy to show it. So even if we like to say that we only write user stories, whatever, I always keep on my side these pictures.
It's certainly clear that just from this conversation so far that we don't just use the user stories as or use case diagrams. That's for sure. And Hasmik, it'd be good to know your perspective as well on anything you'd add.
Yeah, I fully agree with Karen. Overall, the user journey or the story map is a good way to set the context for the system. Yeah, and to show the relationships between the components of the system and have a full big picture. And what I find a good way to elaborate the user stories, yeah, you have this statement as a business requirement coming from the business. Yeah, it could be the user story could be received from any stakeholder, basically. But then for the technical team, you have to elaborate that user story, yeah, provide the details for that particular process. And for this elaboration, to me, use case is a great tool to do. So I just further provide the details and bring this as a process description for this user story and providing the use case for them. Yeah, that I found it's really very great way of setting up the elaborating the user story for the technical team, yeah, with the details that they need to start creating their technical tasks. It's really great way to do it. So and overall, maybe not from the agile context, but rather from the data flow diagram perspective, yeah, for the context itself. As we know, the context diagram is also a high-level data flow diagram, yeah. So I also use this as a starting point for the detailed data flows involved, since I'm more in the data-oriented product working there. So to me, having this context set up as a data flow diagram is a really good way to start with. And then I'll just go into details of these data flows, providing the below levels, yeah, more detailed levels of data flows there. So that's another way to work with the use cases and context diagrams in general, from my perspective.
And I like the different direction each of you have taken, because I mean, in that sense, as Mitch, you've been very much using the context and the use case as an opportunity to drill down into lower and lower levels of detail, whereas there's also that connection to sometimes sideways artifacts, and others even upwards to the scope and the wider enterprise processes or other things to connect an organisation, stakeholders as well, of course. So with that in mind, I mean, there's very little I can add other than perhaps as a technique that I might use to bring that together, which builds on the references that Nuno was referring to a little while ago, is perhaps a formal traceability matrix, just to make sure that the solutions tie back to a requirement and our requirements of solutions. We've thought about all the process and all the issues that connect all of these different points that we've been explaining as well. But perfect, and I think as Nuno was talking there as well, you started talking about beyond just documenting and using the techniques to start to communicate some of the information that we hold. So I think Nuno, you mentioned things like confluence and creating that big picture. So I wonder, and documenting in general, I wonder, building on what you've already said, is there anything further you might add on guidance or information on how to share or how to communicate the context that you've pulled together?
Well, so now it's impossible for us to say okay, so I've been working on this for a while. I have a document of, I don't know how many pages, just take here, and it's what I've been working on. It wasn't a good idea before. It's not a good idea. Now it's even a worst idea. So you can, as you start getting wanting to go more details on a specific part, let's say, one that you want to address in 1 or 2 sprints ahead, sprint or in Scrum, of course, but any other kind of iteration. So
Yeah.
You have that concern that, okay, so if this is the next most important thing, I have to talk to my stakeholders. I get as more details as I can. You have all those conversations, and you want to make sure that you got the right message, so you can do like a follow-up and say, okay, this is what I realized. Having that on those types of platforms, so like Confluence or such, so it just means that you can put like a different how is it called? It's not like so different links, because you can instead of going on a document and go up and down where you want to search, where you have that thing, you have like hyperlinks to that. You can have that as a formal your formal documentation for that project is like a big page, but it allows you to work on it, and you don't actually mind if you keep adding things, as long as you have that easily links that you can put there. Always these kinds of sketching, so I think they are good in your meetings with the stakeholders to say that they are okay with your analysis. If you want them to pass it down to the team, you can also say, so this is the requirement, this is what they have, and it's a good tool to have that message through for when you are building your backlog or whatever. It can also be an input for you to define your tests if you work with a QA team or so. I have already used that as well.
It shows as well it's quite an adaptable
Yes, I
approach,
think
isn't it? And I think you also mentioned Confluence there, and the ability to update pages or different bits of context or different bits of content as well, which is important, which you don't always get benefit if you've got a huge document that exists in physical form.
But it helps you navigate.
Yeah, that's right. And it means as well, you're not got to be responsible for every artifact and delivering it all yourself. It can be the team can contribute as well. Yeah, I definitely like that point. And Karen, I would like your perspective on that, please.
Yeah, I guess I talked earlier about it being about clarity. I guess I'd also like to talk about, and so so any sort of diagram that you're creating is only as good as the clarity it's bringing to the team about what you're delivering, and everybody's understanding the same thing. I guess I'd also probably talk about making sure that's a living document. So making sure that you're constantly kind of checking in that it's right, that you're validating extra information against the picture that you've got, or however you've documented things, that you're I've noticed this actually, some people can be a little bit precious about, I've created something and I don't want to be updating it, but it needs to constantly be challenged. And so you need to be you need to be be able to be prepared for that. That's you know, that's going to happen, and you should kind of allow it to evolve over time. But the kind of flip side to that, I see again something that another thing that perhaps some BAs, less experienced BAs, get a little bit wary of is remembering what they drew the diagram for. So models always represent something and like miss out other things for deliberate reason. They're a representation of the real world. There's a story somewhere of somebody trying to build a map of an actual one-to-one map of a country. It might have been Spain, I can't remember. Physical impossibility. It was obviously a fictional story, but it's making the point that obviously anything as a model leaves things out. So when people are giving you information, when you're communicating, when you're using that document to have a conversation and to get more information out of different stakeholders, different contexts, just be aware of what you don't try and put everything into the document. Some things might belong at different levels. Some things might not belong on there at all. Some things might need to be aggregated up. Leveling is something that is quite difficult to get a grasp of, but I think just keep in mind what you've drawn that diagram for, what you were communicating it, what the intention of it was, and if you change that intention, then be mindful that you're doing that for a reason. So yeah, it's just just being very clear on what you're using those diagrams for and how you're using them to communicate with stakeholders and how you let them the control of how you evolve them, really.
And it's making me think, you were saying that, Karen, that if we can try and think in an adaptive way from the start to try and build in the ability for our colleagues to interact with our analysis or to update our analysis or to connect, build from it, it's helpful. I mean, it's not always simple to do that at the start, but at the very least, perhaps we can think about whether it's references or other connection points from our artifact to others. And even if, rather than build on our own diagram, perhaps, all these other models that might connect to it, just show that there is a connection to something, there's a connection to a process, there's a connection to stakeholders. And then actually you can manage that detail offline as well. So I think that's that adaptability definitely come across as you were talking there, Karen. And Hasmik, it'd be good to hear your perspective as well on how we communicate the context.
Yeah, just the discussions that reminded me two examples based on the previously mentioned topic. One is that in general, like use cases themselves are a good way to, that Nuno said, it's really used for the test teams. So it's a good starting point for defining the acceptance criteria for in general, right, and working with the test teams. That's one perspective that I found really useful with collaboration with the BA teams. And the other perspective is with the development teams, the way that we do updates to the existing use cases. The reason is that for one team that I worked with, they were using use cases for defining a technical design, basically. So they were really jealous if you touch their use cases to do updates on them, and then really they didn't agree with that. Just provide your requirements in a simpler words, and we'll do the updates in our use cases. Don't touch them then. But then I just said, okay, we have a goal, in a use case. We're doing this and getting from the beginning to from the precondition to the post-condition, from the start to the end. And for me, the important part is the goal, to reach the goal, basically, right? So I'm going to suggest you a use case example. It's not just an example. It's better for me to define it in a use case, the enhancement to this particular process. And okay, you're free to update it once you're doing your technical coding. But you find that this will not work, we need to do this check before the other one. Do this. The sequence of the steps or whatever. But for me, is the important one is to get the goal and to do all the checks along the way. So go ahead and do the updates as you wish. So they agreed with that perspective. So it helped me also to define the functional itself and to help them to prepare them for final technical design setup. So it's a two perspectives that I came across. Yeah, I wanted to share with. But overall, I agree with the notions mentioned by Karen and Nuno. Yeah, share.
I mean, there was some very important points there. I mean, about the need to collaborate with your colleagues and interact with them, and to use the learnings and context that you've built up to help them decide what their next moves are. And sometimes I think the context of others can sometimes relate to our own. I mean, and I guess an example of that for me is, like the architects, the technical architects will, in essence, be building up a picture of the technical context, what applications are going to come together to provide a solution, what interfaces are going to exist between those. And that will become their context for the deeper work that they end up doing. But the correlation to the context that we have built up will be, what are the capabilities and the functionalities that we saw coming together as part of the solution, and how do they link back to the requirements and to the scope as well. So yeah, definitely some very interesting points there, and I think we could talk a lot more. I think about the detailed collaboration with stakeholders beyond that as well. I think therefore, I mean, I will try not to repeat much of that. I think the only thing I would add really is that, and along the similar lines, is that knowing that you're going to be collaborating with a lot of stakeholders, for me, I would try to leverage what exists already. It could be those architectural images or blueprints that I mentioned, or it could just be that our colleagues, wherever they may be, have actually seen other context and other diagrams that explain the picture already without us needing to rebuild it from scratch. So I think that's something to do. I think then lastly, I mean, we've mentioned, I think a few of them mentioned stakeholders a fair bit, not just in the last answer, but throughout. I think, I'm sure, starting with Karen, actually, in the very first question. Be interested to know your perspective, and I'll start with Hasmik in this example, as to what role the stakeholders play in defining and refining the use cases and the context. And I'll start with Hasmik on that question.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. Could you?
It's the role of the So what is the role of the stakeholders that they
Stakeholders
play?
in general. Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry. So well, it's huge. I mean, it all starts and ends with the stakeholders in general. So yeah, and what we do as a business analyst, at the end, it's coming for the stakeholders. At the end is for the stakeholders. Sake. So what I think is interesting overall for this particular process models and the context diagram, as such as context and use cases, is that they are those types of techniques that you have to involve each and every one, starting from the solution architect, even with a high level setup of a high level context from sponsor of your project and going to the project team. Each and every member of the project team gets involved there, right? And the business, the domain SMEs and everyone there. So you need to get all those insights from all of them to elaborate this. And it's a really nice tool to get everyone involved, and having I'm using this very constantly in the weekly workshops when we have everyone in the meetings and sharing the functional. So with these techniques, it's really making them to have their input. And as they have the understanding, they also collaborate and provide their inputs to the overall context setup. And it's really nice to see that everyone has the clarity and understanding. And that's why it's really famous, at least at my side, going with those tools. That's the most important thing that as a business analyst, you want to see. Have this good conversation between business and between the technical team. That's the most important thing. And overall, these tools, they kind of remind me to the way the profession of business analyst was started and ended. I get at this point. So it was basically these tools were introduced by the developers at the early stages, like in 60s, yeah, when they were just developers doing the analysis, basically. And then the fun fact is that in 90s only, these tools have the popularity, yeah, and UML was Unified Modeling Language was set up, so this was we started using it. And so you can see when the business analysts were actually system analysts in the context of the development teams, at that time it became quite popular, yeah, because it was the great tool for the system analysts to get the understanding between business and the technical teams. So that's really interesting fact, and I think it's really representative of our profession itself. So at the end, yeah, it's standard, yeah, in software engineering and also for visualizing the overall functional content, yeah, for the business analyst. So to me, it's really a great tools, yeah, for these particular reasons.
I agree. Yeah, no, I mean, whilst I use other tools as well, I definitely rely on UML related concepts as well, and even you know, like all techniques, you know, we can take something and make it a little different. You know, so whether it's a, you know, one I like to do a lot is actually use the concepts of a timing diagram, but I don't quite present it in the same way you would from a UML perspective, because maybe there's slightly easier ways to present it to people sometimes. Anyway, but excellent. Nuno, I wonder, same question to you really in terms of the role of the stakeholders in defining and refining the context and the use cases.
Yeah, so they are of course our main source of the things that we want to know. We can also always talk. There will be always one person that, you know, has the big picture and allows us to build our first iteration of this context diagram. You know, or at least a high level. Usually, then, if you want to go deeper in a specific point, and, you know, just starting to zoom in, usually he says, okay, maybe that part I'm not. I have this guy on my team that he can tell you more about it. So you start talking not just like a process owner or something like that, but actually with other people that work with him.
It's a good way of showing the experts, isn't it? By using the context, it's not just about the process, the business, and the objectives, but actually it can be a great way to show who your experts are to bring in as well. Brilliant.
Yeah,
yeah, sorry.
Yeah, because you can then say, if you have that picture with the different parts and the different use cases, you can say, okay, I really wanted to talk because I want to focus on this use case, which is the person that has the most expertise about this, and so he can really be the best person to explain to you what are the specifics about it. Also, in fact, I remember one project that gave me a lot of fun to do it was when actually the stakeholders that we talked to were just not like the source of information, because actually we're building something that was to be completely new, and actually we could say like we were kind of co-creating things. So it's just not about saying I want this and this and this. It's about us to be together. So I was thinking something about this more to do like this, and some from our team say, okay, maybe we have this constraint and this, and we kind of started building it together, each use case.
That's just build on that context.
Yes, like in front of a whiteboard, and actually it was actually a lot of fun because it was different. It was different from our our other projects that we had, we basically just want them to tell things to us, and we kind of document it and doing our sketching. And in that, he was actually more of asking our help on how should he define his to be stage.
Yeah.
So that was actually kind of fun.
Excellent. And Karen, I'd like to say by design, but you introduced stakeholders to us at the start of the session, so it feels like an appropriate place for you to close out and tell us about the role stakeholders can play.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to involve them, right, and engage them, which is why I've said a number of times about making sure that those, however you're representing the requirements, the use cases, is something that they understand and they engage with. A couple of things I guess came out from listening to Nuno and Hasmik, was the bit around, I guess it can be quite powerful to get a group together and co-create it. I really do like that when you can do that and almost just draw it on a whiteboard. I think some people do get a little bit, again, kind of, you know, I've drawn this, it's taken me a long time to draw this in Visio or Mural or whatever, and they don't want to adapt it. Whereas to just put it on a whiteboard and draw some simple diagrams and show how things connect can be really powerful in a group to get a lot of understanding in a short time. And the other bit, I guess, is that I thought was thinking about from maybe a point Hasmik made in the previous question was that need to iterate. So if you're taking it, you know, if you've got to a certain point and you're taking it to your technical team, you're taking it to your QA or your, you know, your devs, and they see something, they're asking questions. It's that iteration back round with the stakeholder groups to can sort of say, right, okay, so they might have missed something, or something might need to be decomposed down into separate pieces where we've kind of made it one thing, and in order to get to actually understand it to the level we need to understand it to build something, or to understand the current situation, we need to break that down. And so being comfortable in taking it around a number of times, I almost signpost that with stakeholders at the beginning, that, you know, I might need to come around again and ask you some more questions. I see a lot of people thinking it's just like a one attempt at this. And then the last thing I would say is that it can also be powerful to kind of almost draw something up very roughly and put it in front of people and get that feedback that it's wrong, and that's okay, because that'll generate something else that you know, you might, rather than sitting away and spending months trying to get it perfect, just roughly put some boxes together and say, you know, is this, have I understood this? That might be from something they've said or something that you've read some of the documentation. Is this right? Have I got this represented? Is this relationship correct? What am I missing? You know, what comes before this? What comes after this? All those obvious questions that a picture in front of a stakeholder will help them answer those questions. Asking sort of things in an interview sometimes might not get you as much information as you hoped. So yeah, stakeholders, you know, you constantly want to be able to engage them, bring them into that conversation and that building that picture up.
And it feels like a perfect place to end, Karen, as it's all about the picture, really, the context, allowing stakeholders and those involved in the project or initiative or product to understand the big picture and all the connecting parts to it. So I think that we've ended on the right place. So I think all that remains is for me to thank each and every one of you for joining. Really enjoyed listening to your insights, for sure. I'll definitely look forward to hearing more from you in the future in the wider BA community, as I know certainly you're all active in different ways, so I'll keep an eye out for that. Yeah, so thank you again. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much, John.
John.
Thank you much
Thank you.
for having us.
You're welcome.